Welcome back to Tell Your Story Alaska. Today, I drove myself from the valley down into Anchorage, a place I rarely go because I like being in rural places. But I am sitting right now with Karl Thistle. Karl runs a ministry called Aarigaa House, which is a ministry of Covenant Youth of Alaska, also known as Kayak, which I hadn't heard it called that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Kayak. And the word Aarigaa means it is good.
Yeah.
Or excellent in the Inupiaq language.
Correct.
Right. And so, Karl, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Never done a podcast before. It's exciting.
Well, before this podcast, I had never done one either.
Yeah, everyone's got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere. Yeah. Well, Karl, I'm curious about the Aarigaa House. Would you just give us a brief synopsis? What is it and what is its mission? And then we'll get into its backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. The Aarigaa House is a housing ministry for young adults. The main goal is to help people walk alongside Jesus to grow in their discipleship journey. There's some other auxiliary things that we like try to support in, and we try to cater to a certain demographic group, but we're not an exclusive ministry.
What's the demographic?
We try to prioritize people transitioning from a rural context, like a village, especially that wants to come to town for schooling. That was the original thing. It was explicitly for students, alternative housing, to offer extra support in that transition. But we're not exclusive to students anymore. We have people coming in to just pursue a career, right? Or to go to a trade school, things of that nature.
Yeah, because I do hear about these young people who grow up in a village and they struggle with that transition from living with mom and dad at home to what do I do with my life?
Yeah, that's a hard transition for most people, right? At that age, it can be a jarring for a lot of people. But I think especially for someone from a village, the reality is that some of these students that are coming in or young adults that are coming in just for work or school, in a lot of cases, if they're going to UAA, the student body there can be as big or even bigger than the population of their home village. So that kind of transition is exponentially different and more difficult, presents a lot of unique challenges.
So can they, is living on campus a difficult option for them? And so your organization noticed this need, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It started in Fairbanks, and the director of Covenant Youth of Alaska, his name's Byron Bruckner. He's a great guy. He started the Aarigaa House out of his own home because he was doing a ministry in Fairbanks with young adults, and he had some people, one young adult in specific, show up on his doorstep not the middle of the night, but at nighttime, and just said, like, hey, I'm not going to make it in the dorms. Like, if I'm going to be able to get my degree, like, I need to live with you. I need a home, right?
Wow.
He said that to him, and Byron and his family decided to take that young man in, and it led to 2. And I think it got to the point where they had 4 young adults and 3 of their own young children, and it just was unsustainable in that model, right? Just doing it out of their home. So they just saw that need and pursued, what does it look like to make this a full-blown ministry? And that was leasing buildings in different places, different staff rotating through, and now we actually own these buildings here. So it's a very sustainable ministry.
That's really fascinating. So even what that young person said, like, I need a home. So the dorm is not a home for them, and they need a home.
Yeah, a dorm can be a home for sure, right? It works well for some people, but it was very foreign to this young man comes from the village. Just the size of the building and the nature of the multi-room, housing quarters is very, very different to him. So, yeah, and I think that there's a lot of influence within the dorms that was causing him to drift, that I think a lot of young adults in college experience, right? A lot of
drift as in, like, away from good behavior or their faith, or what were they drifting from?
Yeah, I would say you could use either of those terms, right? Good behavior, faith. I would think that he was just getting into things that were pulling him away from the path that he wanted to walk on, right?
Oh, okay.
And I think that it was drugs and alcohol. I don't know the full details of the story. I haven't got to hear it from him himself.
Okay.
But it sounded like, he was just kind of getting bogged down by some things that are prevalent at college. And he was like, hey, I need a more stable, environment where accountability is built in. And
Yeah. So is there a campus still up there in Fairbanks?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't currently have an Aarigaa House in Fairbanks. That is something that we desire to have. We currently just have the location in Anchorage, but the hope is to have houses at trade schools. We've been contacted by Avtech in the past, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
I've heard of
different,
Avtech, yeah.
yeah, different organizations around the state have expressed interest in having Aarigaa House or something similar to it because it seems to be an effective model.
Because they notice the difference in their students.
Yeah. Yeah, or they've heard about it from someone or yeah, whatever it may have been. A lot of different ways people get exposed to the idea.
Yeah. So how long had that story that you told,
Sure.
like when did all that happen in Fairbanks?
That's a good question. I'm not positive. I know that kayak's 25 years old. I'm going to guess that was about 20 years ago.
Okay, so maybe early 2000s
Yeah.
is when it all started. And how long have you been doing it?
Simone, my wife and I, my whole family's been here for 7 years. We're in our 7th year right now. So,
Okay.
yeah, pretty good stretch.
Yeah, and what is the facility? Like, is it an apartment building or?
Yeah, it's actually two different buildings that share a yard. We're on the same plot of land. It's two duplexes. So we have 4 units. My family lives on site in one of the units, and then the other 3 units are for residents, young adults. When everything's operational, we can house 14 has been our max capacity. I would say in my 7 years here, we've averaged around 8
Okay.
probably, and we're on the lower side right now. But eight's also not just the average. I feel like it's kind of around the sweet spot too, because when you start to lose that small group feeling, things just shift in a way that's a little, I think, a little less conducive to pursuing deep discipleship and like real meaningful conversation in those group settings.
So, and I remember I was talking to you about this before. When people sign up for this, they understand that this is a faith-based organization. And so you don't require that they have a profession of faith,
No.
but they understand that they're joining something where you're going to have meetings and Bible study and
Yeah.
worship and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Acts of service, lots of things that Jesus emulates are built into our house covenant, which is just what everyone commits to, right? We like to offer an invitation into a covenant the same way that God invites us into covenants with him.
Oh, interesting. And what is that covenant with the organization?
So with the house, it does shift a little bit to living document. That's the term I like to use with it. We talk about it with the residents and we think critically about it. Like, does this encapsulate what Jesus calls us to? And if not, what needs to be added or removed or tweaked to pursue that vision? The big things that it clearly expects from residents is involvement in the local church, involvement in our community through a couple of different ways. There's high boundaries for substances, right? And physical, verbal abuse. These things are just like absolute, there's no place for them here at all. We have zero tolerance for those things.
And when those things come up, like I imagine in 7 years, you've had those kinds of issues come up.
Absolutely.
And so how do you handle, you catch someone with a substance or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been one of the more consistent issues that we've run into. It's also really painful. And I think it's also incredibly tricky to handle those well. Because I personally am not a fan of just black and white, like 1, 2 strikes, you're out. I think of how the flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing. Right.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of addiction in my family and in my past that I just feel that experience has actually been really valuable for me to come meet people where they're at here and really sort of be able to empathize and understand what's going on. So how do we handle those? It depends on what the person is actually doing, right? There are certain things that we have to have way stricter boundaries with, depending on how they're doing, how it's affecting the community. Are they actually bringing things into the house, right? And what are those things? That could result in like a very quick exit, right?
Yeah.
But if someone is just really struggling to move away from something and they're continuing to be honest with us, right? The honesty is a huge piece that conveys I'm desiring to change and growth and moving away from these things that might be like lifelong crutches or vices for someone.
Yeah.
That takes time. It's not always just a miraculous work of the Lord that changes over the night. In fact, I would say it infrequently is, right? And more often it's a long process of slowly getting better. So we try to work with people the best we can, but you're always weighing that asking the question: is this good that we're pursuing in this person outweighing the harm that it's doing to the community. Because when that stuff shows up, it affects people, especially a lot of our young adults have histories with substances, whether it's firsthand or secondhand, a lot of negative experiences, right?
Yeah. And it can be like triggering, or the temptation is right there in front of
Both.
them.
Yeah,
And this should be like a safe house, a
absolutely.
sanctuary.
Absolutely.
I really like I actually like the smallness of it, because the advantage of a small community is it's a small community. You all know each other, and you're not reliant on rules and policies, but individuals. And I actually like that you don't have like strike one, strike two, and you're out,
Yeah.
because it allows you the space to work with individuals. Like, are they struggling, or are they blatant in rebellion? And so
Right.
you can weigh those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can weigh those things, and really you got to take some of the, not even some, all of those situations you really need to be talking to the Lord about, right? You need that
Mhm.
discernment, that internal guidance, because those are hard things to really decipher, uh, even with the Lord's help. But doing it on your own when you're trying to think like how much of this is a lie, how much of this is someone just struggling. Those are really tough judgments to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I told you before we were going to start recording, is I'm going to poke at your story, because we were even saying like the best conversations happen before and
Right.
after we hit record.
Right.
And one of the things we said before we hit record was, our wounds, or our hiding from wounds, and our when we were younger,
Sure.
drive our modern passions.
Yeah.
So would you just give me a synopsis of your story, and because I want to poke at where your passion comes from. So
Right.
tell me your background.
I was born and raised in Willow. It's about an hour and a half north of Anchorage, small town. It was just like dirt road, small town growing up. I actually consider my upbringing similar to like a rural, like a village experience than a city experience. So I relate more to these young adults coming in, as with Anchorage being like a foreign environment. So that's kind of a blessing, I think. So yeah, I was born and raised out there. Uh, Grew up in and out of the church, I would say. My mom was young in her faith and believed in God and believed that her children should be involved with that, but didn't know what that looked like to actually have a relationship. So she was trying to figure that out, but just bringing us along. And um,
Hmm.
it wasn't until somewhere in high school I really became what I would say a true believer, which is interesting that I say that, because I do believe that I prayed a salvific prayer in the third grade at Bible camp. But then
Like a genuine one, not just like a child.
exactly, but I
Pleasing
was a
someone
child,
differently.
right? But then the reality of actually like wanting to live into your faith and seeing the importance of it in your daily life, that happened somewhere in high school.
Huh.
Ironically, that's also when I was uh, heavily pursuing any opportunity to be involved with basically any substance. I really had like a dual existence going on.
Oh.
It was not a great time. I don't know. Let's just say that there was
No,
a lot of
the word a dual existence makes sense. I think a lot of people could relate to that.
yeah. So that led to some pretty low points, and following one of those low points where I had been unemployed and for the better part of a year, and really just leaning into substances for comfort. I took a job out in Galena, which is a rural village interior, and they have a boarding school there for high school students, where my sister had already been working for quite some time,
Mhm.
and I knew it was a good opportunity, and there was a decent community out there, and I just knew I needed something different, so I took a job out there, hoping to push the reset button, and the Lord used my time out there in a really powerful way to change most of almost everything about me.
Did the powerful thing remove the duality of your life?
Not overnight, but yeah, I don't feel that
So
I
tell me that story. How do you go from I have this faith, I also use substances as a comfort, get
sure,
my adult version of a teddy bear,
yeah,
right?
that'd be putting it lightly.
Okay. Tell me what happened.
Sure. So at the point that I went to Galena, I was, yeah, just saying that I was using substances as a comfort was putting it pretty lightly. Um, I was a heavy drinker, uh, and I guess I don't really need to go into specifics, but it was like 6 days a week. I was consuming more alcohol than any individual should really
Wow.
consume. Um, and it didn't start off that way, but Alcoholism is definitely in my blood. It was from the first time I drank a beer when I was like 12. It became the thing like whenever I had a chance to, I was going to it.
Really,
right?
even when you were 12, like you liked
I
it?
think I was 12. Well, I didn't necessarily love the taste of the beer, but I really enjoyed the feeling
Oh, sure.
after like drinking a whole beer.
Yeah.
So it definitely became the thing I needed to feel okay. It starts off as the thing that is fun and you want to do it to have fun, but it became the thing that I needed to feel okay, which is a really tough existence. So then I go out to Galena and I'm in that space and I'm still drinking pretty heavily whenever I'm not working. But what really was the shift there was, I say it was a work of the Lord, and the Lord often works through people, right? And I landed in this community out in the middle of nowhere. There was a really solid church with some solid men that were older than me, and they didn't shy away from entering into relationship with me and asking me hard questions. And I had peers out there also that were walking with the Lord, people that had ended up there through friendships with my sister and then friends of friends, a lot of people from Moody Bible Institute, including my wife, which I had no idea she was going to be my wife when I met her.
Did she go to Moody?
She did go to Moody, yeah,
Oh.
and a number of people. There was probably like 7 or 8 people from Moody out there
Really?
at the same time, all working on staff in the dorms, and that I was working with
I'll
as
have
well.
that maybe later, but I'll ask because I went to Moody.
Oh,
So
okay.
maybe we know some of the same people.
Yeah, that'd be a fun conversation to
Yeah.
have. So it was being involved, being plugged into a solid church, and eventually one of the major tipping points was realizing when I said it out loud after being asked, like, well, what are you committed to? I had a friend, a relatively new friend, ask me that, and my honest answer was nothing. And when I said that, I just felt like I wanted to die. It was a terrible realization. Like, I'm not committed to anything. Um, so sorry, that's sort of a sidetrack. That got me sidetracked. But
No, I don't think that's a sidetrack. I mean, that sounds like the main thing.
that was a big moment.
The
Yeah.
moment when you say something out loud that's been inside for a long time.
Yeah, and it's really ugly to look at. You bring it out of the darkness and look at it in the light, and it's like, wow, I really don't like that. So it was a long process, couple years there, but walking alongside people that I would say are mentors, older than me that know the Lord, and peers, people that knew the Lord and are willing to have difficult conversations, right? That
Did you
resulted.
welcome those conversations even early on?
I was uncomfortable with them. It was not something that I was familiar with from my upbringing or from my friends, from how just relationships, the nature of all my relationships, I would say.
Was it unfamiliar with like opening hard things? Or like
Yeah.
most people in your life just kind of glaze over?
I think most people, most relationships exist in like a comfort zone where you want to enjoy a person and support them, but you don't ever want to like challenge too much, right? I think people are worried about upsetting others. And I really needed more challenge, and I'd never really received that except from a handful of people. But yeah, it was a very foreign thing at first, and it was uncomfortable. But I think pretty quickly I grew to appreciate it and welcome it. Yeah, it was refreshing, right? It was, oh, this is actually important, and I'm glad that we're talking about these, even though it definitely resulted in me getting defensive at times, right, and flaring up and feeling like people were just being uh, unfairly critical of me.
Or
But
like judgmental, maybe?
sure. Yeah, that's an easy word to throw in there too. But the reality is they were speaking truth and love, and it's an uncomfortable thing when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about, like you said, it didn't happen overnight,
Yeah.
but so it was like a progression of moving, like sanctification, moving towards the Lord,
Yeah, that's a
getting
great
off of alcohol.
that's a
What did that
great
look like?
that's a great church word. It was definitely a sanctification process, which is a process that is never complete, right? It's ongoing for sure.
Right.
I would say that that was when the gas was really getting poured on the sanctification fire during those couple years I was in Galena. Well, I was out there for 7 years. There was a couple years specifically where it was rapid change, a lot of growth. Um, Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that.
No, that's good. So and now you have that story in your past.
Mm,
Tell me how you got connected with Aarigaa,
yeah,
and let's tell that story.
right. So I had been my wife and I, Simone, we had gotten married and been out there. We were in our second or third year of being married. We were out there 7 years together,
Mhm.
6.5. And And
Were you working at the school?
we were working at the dorms. So it's a boarding
Okay.
school. So we were like the residence life staff, right? We were
Yeah.
kind of like big bro, big sis.
It's almost like what you're doing here, but over there.
Yeah, it was oddly similar. Right? And also when we heard about the house and the kayak in general, it was during a time where we had come to the conclusion that we weren't going to be in Galena forever. And we were ready for what's next, but we were really trying to pray the prayer of being eager for what the Lord had for us next, but also being content to be where we were, if that's where God wanted us, right?
Yeah, that's really good.
But in that time, we were looking for other stuff because we knew that we were pretty sure that Galena wasn't forever. So we had some things that just didn't end up happening that seemed like shoe-ins. They seemed like perfect fits. Oh yeah, this is the next thing for sure. The mission lines up. We're like, whatever it was, but they just weren't coming through. And there was a little bit of discouragement in there. I think more so from my wife. I didn't hate the idea of saying I really liked Galena. It was nice. It was a great place.
You still miss it now a little bit?
I do. I have a lot of fond memories, and the pace of a village is maybe more naturally, is what I connect with more naturally.
Yeah.
So, but then one day in that season where we were looking for other things, being confident Galena wasn't forever, someone pretty randomly just reached out to us from Kayak. His name's Jamie Rose, and he at the time was the director of Anchorage Aarigaa, which Aarigaa is the name of the house, right? The Aarigaa House. It's also the name of our young adult ministry statewide. It's called Aarigaa. I forget who chose that name, but I think the students, the young adults themselves, named the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So they reached out to us and were talking to us about the house and how there's a vacancy in the RD, the resident director position, and they just were testing the waters, and we were open to an initial conversation. So we had that talk, and I remember my brain shutting down as soon as I understood what support raising was and what that entailed, and the reality that was connected to this position.
Yeah.
And I remember just like shutting down entirely. And after the phone call, that first call was only about 5 or 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. I basically just told Simone, I was like, well, we're not doing that. Like, I had written it off so quickly in my brain. I was like, there's no way that we're doing that support raising thing. Like, that sounds awful. Yeah. I even think that I, at the time, thought that it sounded like morally wrong. Yeah. Because I had been raised so much to like, oh, you support yourself. You do this on your own merit, right? Which all is good in a lot of ways, but also I think it leaves a lot of weaknesses too when you're overcommitted to that concept. Mm-hmm. So anyways, obviously I ended up changing my mind. It was maybe 3 or 4 days later. I was still thinking about the position, about the job, about the conversation. And at some point I just had the realization that at its core, this position was an opportunity to make your job living out the Great Commission, like to go and make disciples. That's what this position exists for. That's why the house exists. And that just made a huge impact on me. I just remember the feeling of my walls coming down and sort of like a draining of defensiveness, right? It just came out, and there was a warmth left and softness. And in time, I grew to realize that I saw this position, entering into it, as an opportunity to be someone that I didn't have when I was a young adult that I needed. Yeah. And that has proven to be the biggest motivator for staying here. And yeah, it's just intertwined into my time here in like a really powerful and fruitful way.
Yeah. It reminds me of, the kingdom of heaven is like a pearl. And a man saw the value of the pearl, and he sold all he had to buy the pearl. And what you saw is the value of this position. And suddenly having the nightmare of having to raise support.
Yeah.
That was worth the cost of getting the pearl, which is this position of being a father figure, a spiritual leader, a man in these young people's lives that you did not have.
Yeah. And that's not to say that those people didn't exist in my world, right? But I was not walking with any of them.
Yeah.
And this model here builds that in. They're committed. Any young adult here is committing to walking alongside of a mentor figure, and one of the lines explicitly says, "Invest in a discipling relationship."
Wow. So let's talk about that. I'm really curious about that, especially the connection to your story, to these young people coming in. I mean, are there any significant stories that stand out? You don't have to name names or anything, but what is, say, one person who really stands out over your 7 years here that you could tell?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting question because the people I think I've seen the most growth in or fruit in has actually come after they've left the house, and sometimes even leaving under not good circumstances, right?
Really?
Difficult circumstances. But I've seen um, people completely change in the season following leaving the house. I've seen
Huh.
them take steps that I had been like, not begging them. Internally, I was begging them to take these steps, right? But I always really try not to uh, tell these young adults what to do because I'm always putting myself back in their shoes, and I know that if I'm that young adult having someone tell me what I need to do like that, I'm shutting down. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm really having a hard time hearing
So how
them.
do you thread that needle?
Oh man, that's tough. It's tough. It takes a lot. You need to be a good listener. You need to be a really good listener. You need to know that you don't always know best, and you need to consistently convey care and genuine care and love for the relationship with that young adult. They're not a product, right? Which is why I actually have a hard time when people ask me similar questions, which is a very understandable question. Like, who's like some shining example? And it's like, I understand the question. It's not a bad question to ask, but there's a tension in me that's like, I'd never want to present the young adults as a product, right?
Yeah.
And there is an element to that that's always like sort of a necessary evil. We run into that same thing
Like,
when
look, our ministry is awesome because of this shining,
because this
like
person
this
did these
person here.
things. Oh, and listen to their tragic upbringing, and now look at how they're doing. It's like, man, I really actually have a hard time with that sort of narrative, which uh, I would say is unfortunately effective.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your heart behind that. That yeah, it's almost like advertising a ministry rather than the work of the Lord in
Yeah,
a person's life.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, how do you effectively? Was that the question? How do you effectively like
Yeah.
a discipling relationship?
How do you weave the needle? Like, you can't just say, it's easy to say, work hard, stay away from drugs, make good
Right.
choices.
Yeah.
But when you're speaking with people with history that grow up in broken homes, you can't just say make good choices. It's
Have
not that
healthy
simple.
relationships. Yeah, that doesn't do anything.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it just doesn't work.
You really got to be able to show up like Job's friends did at the beginning,
Right.
right? Come, be present, sit, understand what's going on, be willing to sit in the mud. You got to be willing to sit in the mud. Um, and man, praying for that proper discernment and trusting that the Lord's going to give you the right things to say at those important moments. And otherwise, just like really building genuine relationships. You can't just go do ministry in this like shotgun model, right? Where people show up and like try to make big changes in people like overnight and then they dip out. Like
Mm.
that doesn't work. I don't think it works. Ultimately, if the Lord wants that to work, it's going to work. He's going to do what he wants to do.
Mm.
Anything can work if the Lord's will is in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the way that God has made me, I really see the importance in those authentic, genuine relationships, and that takes time to build that trust, to let them learn who you are,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you speak, it bears weight for them, right?
Right. Because they know you spent all that time listening.
Yeah, and
You
they
care about them. You're
right.
not trying to make them a successful story for your ministry or
No,
some other.
you care about them and you want good for them. You want joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want them to live in light and enjoy the freedom and all the good things that come with that. And when they really have time to see that and believe that that's true, and also get to see what some of that looks like in hopefully in my life, in my family's life, as we're right there in close proximity with them, uh, hopefully it starts to push the needle the right way.
And it makes me wonder too if them or plenty of people have experienced the shotgun minister who comes in and, change your life right now.
I think for sure they have. Yeah. Missions trips to the villages are like not incredibly common, but they're not uncommon. And just by the nature of that, how rural that is, like that's very often like a one and done thing, right? Where it's like maybe it's once a year or like twice a year would be like, I would say pretty good if a church was going out to a village twice a year. But even that is like kind of a hit and run, right? It's like guerrilla tactic missions, which is better than none.
Yeah.
Absolutely better than none. But I think the ministry that's really effective in the village is when you have people that are willing to go live there.
Yeah.
They go set up shop and they're like, come be a part of this church with me, right?
Yeah.
Let's do life together. I hate that expression, but I don't have a better one.
I like how in Christian circles we say, "Oh, that's a good church word." Like doing life together, real life, genuine, that kind of stuff. And then, when we overuse it, we cringe a little bit.
I've always cringed at do life. I just don't like it.
Do life.
Let's do life together. It also bugs me when people are ordering their food and they say, "Yeah, I'm gonna do." Right, I'm going to do the number 4, and it's like, no, you're going to have the number 4. I don't know.
I'm going to order the number 4.
Something about using the word "do" in the wrong context, it just bugs me. Yeah,
it's really funny.
Yeah.
This is a bunny trail, but I remember when I was learning Spanish, I learned how many English words we use. It's the same word, but it has like all these crazy meanings. Like the word "get." I was like, how do you say the word "get" in Spanish? Because I might say, hey, get that for me. Well, what I'm saying is grab it, like take it. Right. Well, that's llevar, or llevar, like to take something in Spanish. That's actually like to carry something. But anyway, but if I were to say like, do you get it? I'm saying, do you understand? That's there. It's a completely different word, but the same word in English. And so in English, it's like a diluted language.
Yeah, a lot of times.
But even culturally, what you were pointing at before, I'm gonna do that's incorrect. So we're just in Christian circles, we use language like that where we dilute good words with like do life or the word genuine or authentic. We can like hijack those words sometimes, trying to get relevance in a quick shotgun way. When what you really need is all that time, like Job's friends who sat with him for 7 days in silence.
Yeah. They did really good until they started talking.
Right.
So I specified first half of Job's friends showing up. We're not trying to be like them in the second half. I don't think they did great.
Yeah, I like that. Tell me about just the nature of the ministry that you do. I suspect there's some stories that don't end well, like people who have to leave. Like, how do you handle those?
It's so painful. There's no like simple answer to that. It's different with each person depending on what they're struggling with. But I've definitely had a number of people that I have taken the time to build those really genuine relationships with, and I have deep care for, and I've had to have them leave often into circumstances I know are very bad for them, and that's very difficult. But we can't. They ultimately make those choices themselves. We do everything we can to show them what's coming, right? And make it very clear, like, hey, if you continue to do these things, you're actually choosing to leave. And if you choose to leave, like, what is your plan? But some people just can't get that thorn out of their side. They just can't, even if the alternatives are so much better and they know the path they're on is just leading to destruction. They just can't get off it. So it's a really difficult one.
Yeah, I keep sometimes my wife tells me I need to get a video podcast, but if I had a camera on, you can see obviously you're thinking of a few people specifically that you care deeply about. You had to say goodbye to.
Yeah.
And do you keep in touch with them after they go back to some terrible thing?
Yeah, so it's actually I think it's one of the most important things in this position, and it's something that wasn't written into the position when I started here, but I've adjusted my own job description, I guess you could say. And the answer is yes. Short answer is yes. I continue relationship with young adults after they leave here. And like I said earlier, that's actually where I've seen some of the most genuine transformation in people is in the season after they've left the house during that continued relationship. When they get out of what they had here and they realize like, oh, that was real. Like in this world out here, apart from the Lord, apart from my community, is like not what I want. Right.
Wow.
I see them have genuine change.
But we were talking about how asking people to leave and if they come back, and you were saying that some of the best stories that have come out of this ministry are after people were asked to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the best stories or some of the biggest seasons of growth that I've seen in young adults has been after they left the house. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would like to know about the we're in this basement right now. There's all these couches in here.
Yeah.
This looks like a place where people spend time hanging out. I'm seeing like a projector screen. Maybe you watch some movies or something, but it just looks like a very pleasant place to hang out. So tell me, you mentioned when people sign up, they understand they're joining like a discipleship program.
Right.
And I'm assuming you have some kind of meetings or something. So tell me about those.
Yeah. So we have a group meeting every week that we call house dinner. That's for everyone that lives at the house. They come together at our home in our unit. My family and I, my wife and I, we prepare a meal and we do a family style sit down meal all at our big table. And then following that, we do a traditional check-in circle with a talking piece. That's actually a really important part, I believe, because that weekly connection where you're the only person talking for some people, it's 10 words, right? But some people actually kind of bare their soul each week a little bit. But that is a time at bare minimum once a week, you are going to be seen and heard and known by a community. And I think that's a really important piece. That piece alone prevents people from hiding, right? From fully withdrawing. So we do the family style meal, the check-in circle, and then we have house study right after that, which is usually about an hour to 90 minutes. A lot of times it's scripture. Sometimes it's not. We'll also once a month during that time, during the house study time, we'll do a service, an active service, which most commonly is making a large pot of soup, and then we actually drive around and serve the homeless around town. Yeah.
Wow. I'm really interested in this check-in circle. And so if each resident that lives here will share and the rest just listen. So is it like we're all just going to listen? There's no judgment here. How you doing? And
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it can be a surface answer and it can be a heart answer, right? It can be a soul level answer.
But even if it's like oh, I'm fine, like not much, you just accept that as
Sometimes people get it and they say my week's okay and they pass it.
Okay.
And that's discouraging when that happens, but I'm not going to force someone to share something that they don't want to share.
Like they need to be free to not share.
Yeah, the hope is that the engagement of other people that are not in that space of wanting to be withdrawn or hide certain things away, that'll coax it out of the other people that are feeling a little more reserved over time, right?
And does it?
Yeah, I would say that throughout our time here, as the longer someone's been here, the more inclined they are to share at house dinner and to engage, or at house check-in circles, and to just sort of engage on more of a heart level instead of a surface level.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to apply that concept you just check-in circle to my family. I'm currently wanting to get men together from my church to literally just sit around a bonfire and hang out.
That's a perfect time for a check-in circle.
Yeah.
A fire is perfect.
Yeah, there's something about sitting around a fire or around food that opens men's hearts. Food and fire is what we want.
Yeah. Generally anything that you can focus on that's not the other guy's face. That's what men usually, that's when they start to talk the most, that's been my experience.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
It's like,
so you don't have to look each other in the eye.
You're like sitting on a bench looking at something.
Yeah.
Or if you're, sitting in a car. Like a lot of guys will talk in the car when you're looking at the road in front of you.
Oh yeah. That's right.
A lot of my one-on-ones that I do with young guys, I go for drives. I try not to go sit at a coffee shop with them.
There's something about the eye to eye that folds us up.
Yeah. I think there's a cultural element at play too. I think eye contact is much more prevalent in dominant culture, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to like village culture, which is a lot more casual. And I think in general, more indirect, slower pace. The like firm handshake and unwavering eye contact is like not super prevalent
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just been on my heart a lot lately, just talking to a handful of men that I assume have it all together. Even like the men who sit next to me in church.
Mm,
Sometimes like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" And just like, well, I mean, because I don't know if it's because I'm dominant culture or whatever, but I do look people in the eye. I'm like, "How's it going?"
mm,
And I just sit quietly and wait for an answer. And usually they go, "Fine." Okay, what's going on? And they start like leaking a little bit,
yeah.
but and I just keep sitting there
You
and
just wait.
you just wait.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh, this guy's actually like wanting to know what's happening in my heart."
Yeah.
It's amazing. And men, I don't, I doubt it's unique to Alaska, but Alaskan men are so lonely. They're so desperate for
Mm,
connection with other men. It is like this desperate need.
yeah.
And it's true, I assume, in these young men in the villages. I assume it's true in your life. It's, at various points. And man, I love what you just said, the check-in. I think
Hmm.
that's a useful tool.
Yeah. Well, and it's similar to what you were just talking about too, with the just you were willing to sit and wait. You were leaving space for someone to think and then talk, right?
Yeah.
You're leaving space for people to talk. That's what the check-in circle is. We're
Yeah.
creating space for people to share. And we're all bought in on it. Like we're going to sit here until you've had the time to make sure that you can communicate what you want to communicate. Because it takes some people more time. That leaking might actually be someone's like socializing, like warm up, right?
Right.
Because it's not for some people that are especially more introverted. They don't chat a lot, or
Right.
they don't get introspective, right? It could take them a while.
Right.
So that's, yeah, the check-in circle is great. And just, I would say the house culture in general, a big part of it is that I try to foster is that we don't fill space, right? And that is like a pretty common dominant culture thing. We're used to being entertained. We're used to having whatever's happening is organized and the schedule's filled and it all makes sense and one thing butts up into the next. And if there is some space, like we got, Johnny over here is really good at filling space. He's going to jump up and crack a joke, or he's going to talk about a ministry highlight over here. And it's like, no, we don't do that. Like sometimes there's space, and like for some people that's awkward, but like we're okay with it.
We're just gonna sit in that empty
We're
space.
gonna be fine. And maybe in that empty space, sometimes like something really important happens because that space existed.
Well, it seems like we need more empty space in all of our lives. We're being stimulated to death in our culture.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think that there's much conversation to have about that other than it's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Setting up some safeguards for different things is pretty important right now.
Yes. So, Carl, if I was a young man in a village and
Mhm.
I was interested in Aarigaa,
Yeah.
what would I do?
The it's really easy to apply to. For some people that can feel like a commitment, but applying is not a commitment, right? It's an
Yeah.
expression of interest. It's saying I like what you have I like the sounds of what this is. Like let's explore it, right? And just applying is very simple. We have like a 5 or 6 question application that is really just designed to to allow someone to express interest and for us to start a conversation. And I'm the one that fields those. The application's on our website, cyak.org, and then you just click on the Aarigaa House, and the application is right there on that page.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's really easy.
Yeah, I'll put that link in the show notes.
Sure.
Yeah. And so once they apply, then you have conversations with every applicant. You just talk.
Absolutely. Based on their responses, their initial responses, I have follow-up questions. I highlight some certain things from the house covenant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if they're still interested and the questions are all lining up, then we have, if possible, in-person meetings, if not, phone calls, and just really
Right.
talk through like what is the house about, find out what their expectations and hopes are, right, for the season, and yeah, we just go from there.
And do they pay rent or how does that work?
We do have a program fee. It's pretty affordable. It's currently $450 a month. It
Mhm.
includes
Probably cheaper than anything you can find.
yeah. Last I heard was a studio in Anchorage, just like about 1,000 a month.
Wow.
And that's without utilities. So we include all that stuff too in our program.
So you have to be careful about people who are not interested in your program, but interested in cheap housing.
Yes, and I've seen the effects of that. I've had people show up here because that's their the biggest selling point for them, and it does hurt the community. So I actually try like not to overshare the whole like price point, you know.
Oh,
Not
okay.
something you want to lead with in a conversation.
Right.
Yeah, it's not the first thing you want someone to hear about.
But you don't want money to stop someone who wants to come from coming.
No, we want it to be affordable. We want it to be affordable housing for someone who wants to come and get an education and like not go into debt, right?
Yeah.
Or come and start working an entry level job and also be able to save up some money instead of just having to literally live paycheck to paycheck just to, you know, meet your basic needs.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you are able to pull that off, you get them set up to launch into life.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the hope. We are still working on developing what does that look like programmatically for us to have things in place that are actually launching people out of here.
Yeah.
Right. We haven't really slayed that dragon yet.
Well, that's a hard dragon to slay.
Yeah. Well, it's a big hope for the house though. There's a practical piece. Like discipleship is the most important thing, but we really want to be equipping people to adult well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Karl, I think I got a good glimpse into your heart. I knew you, you know, I know your sister pretty well.
Yeah.
But you were always the guy I saw at birthday parties.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad I got to open up Karl's heart a little bit and hear about what you do. It's been really cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on my show, man. And make sure you check out the show notes. I'll put links down there. And man, I love what you do here.
Appreciate that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. That's encouraging. It's always fun to get to share about the house a little bit because most people in our circles like know what it is, and I end up like not talking about it really. I don't like pitch the house very often anymore, having been here for so long.
Because everyone knows already what you
do.
Yeah.
So just like getting to run through it again is like a refreshing reminder. It's like, yeah, this is a good thing, man, because it is easy to get bogged down.
It gives you get to say like the big picture in a short time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing
That's why I'm here. All right, let's get energized.
Easy to get lost in the weeds, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So thanks for having me and just sitting and listening and asking questions. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, Karl. We'll see you later.
All right, see you.